Welcome to the Mind Money Spectrum podcast, where your hosts, Aaron and Trishul Patel, go beyond traditional finance questions to help you explore how to use your money to achieve the freedom you want in life.
Hi, my name is Aaron I'm a financial advisor in the Bay Area, and I'm here with Trishul Patel, a wealth manager on the East Coast.
Hey, Aaron, great to be here today, and thanks everybody for listening and watching.
Great to be here as well. So before we continue our conversation from last month, we wanted to pause and just kind of announce we were notified that we have now had 10,000 downloads and listens between our podcast and these YouTube views. So we felt like this is a milestone of some sorts that we want to recognize. We have no idea what it means or the implications, but it seemed like a big ground number that we want to talk about. So, Trishul, how did you feel when you saw 10,000 downloads?
I feel like the 5,000 wasn't too long ago. So
actually, I felt the same thing. My thought was like, did we just pass 2,000?
Yeah.
And exponential growth is a thing.
I guess so. Yeah. And, maybe some other things that went through my mind. We actually, I guess our listeners may have noticed, we haven't been releasing as much as we were in our first year. So for many reasons, we've gone through a couple of iterations and evolutions on our release schedules. And it seems like in the first year, we were pretty gung-ho. Of course, we had a lot more time.
Yeah.
And we were targeting once a week. That's kind of how we mentioned this in our first episodes. That's kind of how we started. But there's been certainly evolutions as our businesses have picked up and we've thought that we wanted to say. And it looks like we've kind of gravitated towards once a month now. Is that kind of what we're targeting now, Aaron?
Yeah. And I feel like it's a normal evolution of us trying to follow our own advice. It's like when we started our business, we didn't have as many clients. We had the time and made this more of a priority. As we took on some clients, clients are the bigger priority for us. And as our business is built enough to be a little more stable, family and lifestyle are a little bit more of a priority. So I still like having these conversations, but we're kind of trying to be honest that this is not our biggest priority in what we put out in the world. So I still want to keep doing this, but yeah, about once a month feels right.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's probably also notable that we have a bit of a backlog we haven't cleared up yet. So that those episodes are recorded, but you may notice a gap in our episode count between, I don't know, like 110 to 120, something like that.
I like to think okay, in terms of priorities, like family, father, husband is up here, financial advisors here, business owners, so taking care of conompliance and accounting, make sure all my vendors get paid and taxes get paid, podcast content creation is here, and then podcast editing is intentionally below the screen.
Below taxes.
Yeah. It's compliance and taxes are more right here, whereas the actual editing and release and podcast production, it's even below the creation part.
Right.
But it actually fits what we did from the beginning. We've talked about this on the XYPN podcast, XYPN radio, how we didn't necessarily have a plan okay, we're definitely doing a podcast and here's our format. We just turned on Zoom and clicked record for an hour and started talking. And once we had, I think, 8 episodes recorded, it's okay, I think there's something here. How do we actually put this out? We just kind of been figuring it out as we go along. And there's a lot of things like that I hope other people, I don't want to say take inspiration from, but at least acknowledge that this is not what we do as a profession. Podcast and content creation is not our profession. But it's something that we're figuring out and doing along, and we're enjoying it, and it fits our lifestyle. And we hope that there's some other step above hobby. It's I'd say it's just a little bit more important than that, but it feels like that. It's it's like a business hobby kind of thing.
Yeah. And we come a long way in streamlining this whole process. So the transition to the videos and the YouTube actually had some other side benefits for us. Basically, we've cut the editing down to, I think, almost nothing at this point. If we recall, last year we were recording these like intros after the fact and then stitching everything together and doing a lot of post-production. So we kind of got it down to the point with the tools we're using today where we kind of record this thing once and done, and we pull the files and put it out there, right? We do the intros and outros all in real time. So there's no real post-production going on.
We've probably cut post-production from like 2 hours to like total man hours between the two of us, like at least an hour each, down to about 10 to 15 minutes each.
Yeah, that's kind of it. I remember at the beginning, I used to actually listen to every episode like straight through, and I would edit out any, hey, was that somebody coughing? Hey, was that a hiccup? But it's kind of once and done now. You can imagine you can get to 2 hours if you have to listen to an hour conversation before it goes out. So that's a lot of the bulk right there. But in addition to that, just being able to record something and just put it out there, we're using a program now called StreamYard, which basically does everything end to end in real time.
Yep. And that's why if there was a lesson or takeaway, it's like trying to get over the fear, like do the thing and then figure it out later. Like take that first step and that second step, and like you don't have to have everything perfect. Just like start doing the thing you want to do, and then you can make adjustments. You can make experiments. You can figure it out along the way. Like I actually didn't like that. I'm going to stop now. Or okay, I kind of like doing this. Let's build on this.
Yeah. So maybe it was basically we just wanted to spend a few minutes giving a little backstory of what's been going on with our evolution. So hopefully that does clear up things. And also, 10,000. That's a good number.
Yeah. That's a good point. It's people who might be only seeing us on YouTube would have not realized we have 120 episodes on a podcast already recorded that they can go listen to. That we've been doing this for over 3 years now, since middle of 2019 or so.
Yeah, we're in season 4 now, if that's how we kind of call it. But yeah.
Sounds good. So last month, Trishul introduced me to ChatGPT and the implications of AI. And we immediately got derailed by the idea that ChatGPT could pass the Turing test, and we started going down the philosophical rabbit hole of are humans deterministic, or do they have free will? And that was a fun conversation, but we wanted to get back to what we thought was going to be the conversation about some of the practical implications of ChatGPT. So, Trish, why don't you reshare a quick story about how you did the Roth conversion article and some of your initial thoughts of implications for you and other implications for other businesses and or education in the either present or near future.
Okay, so ChatGPT has been around for a couple months now, but artificial intelligence has been around for decades, right? And ChatGPT was released by OpenAI, this project, this research firm that basically researches artificial intelligence, and they've been developing this tool and released it to the public. And I started seeing it pop up here and there. And one thing that really caught my eye is that this individual it was Reddit that said to ChatGPT, plan out my Christmas dinner, something just really out of the ordinary that you wouldn't really think of asking a chatbot to help out with. And it did it. It did it pretty well. And that got me really thinking, okay, what is this thing able to do? And the more I started looking into it, the more intrigued I became. And then I just started seeing all of these different applications pop out about this novel, chat tool that people can leverage. One thing that popped up very recently is how quickly this tool has been adopted. Now that we have the video, I'm going to share a little it's just an image, but let's see if I can do this. It's just going to show, let's see, what other people have done in terms of adoption compared to other tools that are out there. So let's see if we can get this done. Okay, can we see that?
Yep, I see it.
Okay, so this is a simple chart just saying how many days it took to reach 1 million users. So in terms of adoption, Netflix, it took a couple years, like 4 or 5 years to reach 1 million users. Airbnb did it in 3 years. Facebook did it under 10. Spotify, half a year. The iPhone took a few months. ChatGPT hit 1 million users in 5 days.
Okay, so my first thought there when I look at this is Spotify, Instagram, and ChatGPT are free. Netflix, Airbnb, and Facebook is free, but Netflix, Airbnb, and iPhone cost money. So that was my first thought there of like, it's an interesting chart, but doesn't quite feel like it's apples to apples. Like ChatGPT compared to Facebook, that's pretty impressive. Although I think Facebook even like self-restricted it, they restricted itself to only certain colleges at the beginning. So maybe there's some part there. So maybe like the Spotify and Instagram. Oh, you have to pay for Spotify? Like, or is there a free version?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's probably a better comparison. Spotify and Instagram to ChatGPT, which is still like orders of magnitude faster. So I agree with that.
This reminded me of just technology adoption charts that I've seen over time. For example, there's been other comparisons to how long did it take for the radio to become adopted versus the television, right?
Yeah.
There's notions of once you hit this like tipping point of like 50%, then you're off to the races for technology, right? And it took like, I'm going to make up numbers because I don't know them off the top of my head, but it took decades for radio to hit that 50% threshold. And then it took, like a couple decades for TV to hit that threshold. And then you talk about newer technologies like internet, and cell phones that, I think cell phones was less than a decade to hit that threshold. And now we have the infrastructure in place so that we can spread all these things for free, right? The prices have come down in this chart. They're almost nothing, but the technological implications of them have increased. So that, that's kind of what I saw with this chart. We're not talking about decades. We're talking about days.
Yeah.
We're not talking about paying for something like a TV or even a radio, which was, fairly expensive back in the day. Yeah. This is free.
I think there's probably not a conversation today, but when I also think about that, I actually think about like business cycles with the stock market of like some of the bulls and bears that could go on years or even decades. Like feels like we're going through it in months. Like we see markets responding to information so much faster, and so we're seeing bigger crashes and bigger rises. And it's kind of like it's becoming so fast that it almost reinforces that idea like you can't make predictions on highs and lows because you're going to be wrong a day later kind of thing. By the time you've done the research, it's too late. But there's probably a variety of other similar ideas like things are just accelerated and human brains might be having trouble keeping up.
Yeah, and I think this particular technology kind of takes that type of acceleration to the next level. Certainly with the adoption, but the ability to do things that previously did actually take time can now be done very, very quickly.
So when I think you asked for a Roth conversion article, I think something like that, and what was your thought there as to like how it applied to you or the potential impact to you or your business?
Okay, so basically I wanted to test it out, right? So I went to OpenAI. Anybody can do it. Although we tried to go through it on the last episode and it was already full, and I just went now. It's still full. So they're clearly feeling the flex.
The technology got really fast, but the like website and server hosting has not caught up.
I doubt they anticipated, the scale that this would take off at.
if something is free, it's hard to pay for Amazon Web Services to scale up.
Yeah, they're talking the scale of, the largest websites out there for
Yeah.
a small company, which obviously isn't making money directly from its users at a scale that would likely be needed. But okay, so the reason I wanted to test it out because I've heard examples of people have asked it to write stories where you give ChatGPT a premise and it'll literally come up with a work of fiction or short story, a poem, whatever you want it to do. And then I've heard other examples where people have asked it really tough questions and it's gone out and figured out the answer and spit it back in real time. So I chose Roth conversions because it's something we see, but the backdoor Roth in particular is an example that often gets muddled and confused. For example, if you try to search on internet articles, you may not get a good understanding of how it works. So I asked the ChatGPT, okay, how do you do a Roth conversion? And literally in real time, it spit back a response. And, frankly, I thought the response was 80% there. It didn't cover all the bases, but it did a pretty good job. In fact, it would be a good basis for somebody to get going on, what to do with that type of situation. And then the good thing about ChatGPT is you can just keep asking more questions. Like, is there edge cases to think about, or my situation is like this and so on. And you could probably narrow it down to something really specific.
Okay. So were you thinking, so as you had mentioned this, you're like, could this write the blog article for you on your own website?
Yeah. And that's what came to my mind because I used to write blogs a lot more and I stopped doing it because it's tough to do, right? You gotta.
Well, I think our conversation has kind of replaced that different content creation.
Yeah.
So I want to give you credit for that.
Sure. This is easier to do. It's easier to just talk out what you think rather than craft it in prose, right? And reading the response from ChatGPT, I thought, hey, this is a pretty good article, actually, though. I could actually share this with minor changes to my clients if they asked, right? Sometimes my clients need an overview of something detailed. Well, this sounds pretty good. And then I thought, okay, wait, yeah, this could also be a blog post, right? And then I even asked ChatGPT, what if I want this to be a blog post? What do I do about the citation? And then the ChatGPT said, well, okay, here's your citation for this. And it just gave it to me. So I'm like, okay.
Was that other websites that had pulled text from? Is that citations you're talking about?
In this particular case, since I guess it's general enough, it gave me a citation that links back to ChatGPT.
Okay. So ChatGPT was saying it was the source of that. And I guess there's a little, I don't think we want to get into, like, can we trust that ChatGPT got it right? Do we trust that it's using current numbers based on current tax law? Like, we're still at a early enough stage, again, like 5 days to 1 million users, that kind of trust is not there. But we saw Wikipedia develop that level of trust relatively quickly, where now that's a legitimate source, even though it's also open source and can't be changed and edited. There's enough moderation there where if you quote Wikipedia, that's a pretty verified and reliable source. So I feel like we'll say ChatGPT gets to that level of trust as a Wikipedia.
Yeah, and I remember when Wikipedia initially came out, there was that trust issue, right? It's been around for decades now, but initially the concern was, this is free and
anyone can change this.
Anyone can change it, right? Yeah, exactly. But to this day, it is a pretty reliable source, and I think empirically there was research even early on saying it's just as reliable as an encyclopedia, if not more, because it gets updated.
Yeah.
So for ChatGPT in particular, I've seen some evidence on its reliability. I'll share my screen again. Here, look at this. I didn't know. Okay, so you can read the title, right? The ChatGPT actually passed an MBA exam given by a Wharton professor, meaning the professor had questions and ChatGPT answered it to the satisfaction of the professor's whatever he was looking for. I'll provide a few other things. Apparently, many Stanford students started using it on their finals, and it became obvious that they were being coached by ChatGPT.
So I'm assuming we'll give the benefit of the doubt, like the Wharton professor was doing some kind of like double-blind study, or like he was not aware that he was judging at ChatGPT. He thought it was a student. And the article of the Stanford students, that's kind of what the next level of the conversation, because that was actually my first counter, because you had brought up the idea of like, does ChatGPT replace knowledge of advisors? Does it like kind of replace? We had to go through an education and test requirement to get the CFP certification, the Certified Financial Planner. Will a ChatGPT or an AI replace that knowledge requirement? And from a knowledge perspective, I think that's closer to true, but I'm also not concerned at all. And a part of that is the students who were going to cheat on the test could have cheated before ChatGPT existed. And I think the conversation gets into a kind of like a process over results idea, that the people who will focus on the process and learning for the sake of learning and try to continually push their own education and expose themselves to a broad variety of topics will be able to advance and use something like ChatGPT in a way that those who are just trying to get the answers to the test won't progress.
I see that. I believe that to an extent, but I also think it's likely going to change how we feel about testing certain things. For example, I remember growing up, we were always told, you got to learn your math and your multiplications, and you got to be quick at it because you're not going to carry a calculator everywhere with you. And obviously, we all carry calculators with us like nonstop. And growing up, there was a lot of emphasis on being quick with numbers, right? Being able to do the math in your head. And to an extent, that's quite helpful, right? Not having to lean on the tool to figure out numbers. I will admit, though, I go to the calculator quite often, even if I can do the math in my head, because it's just as easy now. And
so I will say that as my kids go through school, there is more of an emphasis on estimation. And while I don't think they directly say this to the kids, I'm pretty sure, my understanding of math, especially as it gets more advanced, that they need to be able to recognize when the answer on the calculator is wrong because they had an error at one of the inputs. If they do 5 times 10 and they get 5,000, they have to intuitively know, wait, that doesn't feel right. I need to double check it. And if they do 5 times 23 and get 10,000, like, that's off somewhere. And so there's emphasis on kind of estimation, and again, I think this is more like a process and understanding scale, where they don't care what the actual answer is. They just want to know that you're getting close enough, so that you, if you can, and by starting this early, they are, again, they'll mark you wrong if you take the time to get the exact answer. If they asked for rounding. And so I think that's one good advancement in math education, because I think that, again, that idea of, if you use a tool like this and it's way off, you can tell. You can use your judgment over, and it's most likely to be human error on the input in the first place, but there's still that need to understand how to do the problems anyways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's a good evolution. I remember when I was a kid, when we were learning these types of calculations, just simple arithmetic, right? There was an emphasis on speed. We used to have exams where you have a minute and you would race through it, right? And this was part of your daily or weekly math exercises to get through it quickly. And then your brain starts developing shortcuts for like multiplication and division, because if you want to do it quickly, there's quicker ways to get to the answer mentally, right? To be able to do that. And this was a skill that was valued. That was quite important.
It was drilled in.
It was drilled in. They
were
called drills.
You got to have every single, probably up to like 12 times 12. You need to be able to do every multiplication up to that.
Yeah, and you know that there are some careers today where that is important, right? I remember traders. If you're a trader in the financial markets, you got to know those numbers. You got to multiply by 100. You got to by that. You got to be able to do that quickly, and you have to do it on your toes. But the vast majority of math calculations aren't at that speed, right? In normal daily life, and normal even business lives, and even in our financial lives today. But I think the emphasis has changed to, okay, how do you use math so that you build up an intuition on, again, what's right, what's wrong, and what makes sense and what doesn't, and how do you apply it, right, to situations, so that when you do need to do it, you can still lean on the calculation and get a result, a calculator or Excel or whatever it is to get the result. So I think that is the big change. The tool has allowed us to do, like the calculators have allowed us to do calculations at an exponential rate correctly, but it's how we've used those tools that have changed. And I think it's enhanced us in our ability to do math overall.
So it sounds like, I think you and I kind of agree that ChatGPT, it might replace our like blog posts, or like even people won't come to these episodes for knowledge on the topic. Like we've done some on specific topics. I've done ISO exercise strategies. We've done mortgages and interest rates and Roth conversions and 401ks and savings and compound growth. Like it sounds like topic specific may be less important for us. But understand, like I said, like when to use the tool, which tool to use, how to apply it, that kind of higher level thinking will still be necessary.
Yeah, I think there's another evolution that went on over my lifetime with education. I remember early on, a lot of it was focused on memorizing, facts and regurgitating, right? And at some point, things changed to the point of exams became more open book, right? And things became more about concepts than spitting things back, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a similar evolution that the calculator went through. I think there's a better understanding that memorizing facts isn't really knowledge, right? It isn't really understanding. It can literally just be memorization for the sake of the exam. And after that, it's quite fleeting. So
I remember my AP U.S. History and AP Government teacher did have us memorize the years for every president of every presidency. So both like election year and the time they served. But he was very honest about, you don't need to know the numbers. What it does is when you go into the AP test and you see a year, you automatically have the context for the political situation at that time.
Mm-hmm.
You have an idea of which president was in power, and was this a lull in U.S. history, or was there something more active? And like, so you can make these connections a little bit faster, especially in a AP exam where it is not open book. But he was honest about, like, you need to memorize this, but here's why.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's enough of those little things where it's not the facts and details, but it's knowing that a backdoor Roth is a thing, and that there are income restrictions that we need to double check,
Mm-hmm.
so that when I see a client, they come to me and I look at a tax returns, like, you made a Roth contribution last year, but you made too much money. So now we need to do a removal of excess contribution. We need to undo that Roth. And so it's like, I can look up the details. I can confirm the numbers. It's been 6 or 7 years since I had to do this. I have to probably check the process, but I know that it's a thing, so that when I'm exposed to it, then I'll use a ChatGPT or Google search. I think that's in my mind. That's like ChatGPT is just a better Google search. Like, so as of right now. And I think we actually had a comment on a previous YouTube video that made that analogy that I thought I really liked. And I can then go double check what is I'm pretty sure I know it because I've had to memorize it for the CFP, but how to do that removal of excess contribution. I think I know how to do that pretty well. What's the income limits on Roth contributions? Well, that changes every year. So I can double check the IRS tax brackets and the rules for that particular calendar year. So like, I don't need to know what the tax brackets are in any given year. I can double check it because especially it changes every year, but I do know that they are a thing. And so it's a broader connection of multiple things, but I don't need to memorize the numbers.
Right. Yeah. And you can imagine in the past, there was a bigger emphasis on memorizing because you couldn't get stuff when you needed it.
Yeah.
Right. You had to carry it around in your brain. But I do remember a quote that even stuck with me before all of this technology. It was this notion of never memorize what you can look up in books. And I tried searching for have you heard that before?
I have not.
I thought it was like another Warren Buffett quote, but apparently it's attributed to Einstein, maybe, but who knows? It's one of those things. But the notion is, if something it can be looked up when you need it, why spend your precious time, instilling it in your brain? And so I think there's a transition in just learning in general. We talked about this in one of our earlier videos on education, where I think the concept I was trying to portray is, I feel like education shouldn't be about learning things. It should be learning how to learn.
Yeah.
That's basically the goal of having an individual be able to succeed. If they can learn how to learn properly, then what else do they need? Because, for example, with a calculator, you can lean on it if you know how to lean on it properly. With Google, you can lean on it if you know what to ask. And now with ChatGPT, if you are good at learning and asking the right questions, it can tell you whatever you want to know.
It reminds me, Jessica, my wife, has talked about when she's interviewed engineers in the past. As a former engineer, she's now a manager. She always hated like the whiteboard exams that engineers would have to go like do this coding problem. Mm-hmm. So when she got to it, like, she would ask some like process kind of questions and some like philosophical work questions. Like, one of her favorites was like, if you disassemble a clock and you put it back together, but you have parts left over, it still works. What do you do? And because like they're trying to focus on man hours, like if the thing works, then I'm fine with it. They don't have to make it perfect. Another one was, she wanted engineers in interviews to say how they would Google the answer to this. because there's enough coding problems that have been solved by someone else already and shared on the internet somewhere, that they like. She doesn't want you having to reinvent the wheel. Like, if someone's already done it, let's use what they've done. And so, like, how to use Google skills was actually a relevant engineering interview question.
Yeah.
And I also remember when you talked about, I think it's the same Khan Academy, like in relation to energy. Like, you had this idea that like the price of energy, the cost of energy will eventually go to zero, and cost of education will eventually go to zero. And I almost want to either like addendum that or like slightly nuanced, counterfactual. Like, I don't think the cost of education will go to zero, but the cost of like knowledge of facts goes to zero. Like, any given year or data point, any kind of memorization, like that cost goes to zero. So it's like the cost of knowledge might go to zero, but the cost of education might still be worth something.
Here's an analogy that popped into my head. You know, the teach a guy to fish versus giving them the fish analogy, right? So I think the old way of education is just giving them more, giving students more fish. Like, here's more fish on this subject. Here's more fish on that subject. If you teach students how to learn, they can learn anything. And for example, with like, I always thought with education, it's about just getting knowledge in the right format that suits you. I thought that was a big part of it, right? For example, there is a professor out there who's the best in the world at teaching X. And then there's 50,000 other professors who are not as good and who will stumble through it and probably do a worse job. Why can't everybody look towards X, or for them, their personal X? And if they have any questions, ask ChatGPT.
So I still want to kind of get back to that. Like, one of the things I think about, and this might be like a human behavior kind of question, is like, I still like trivia. And my kids' alarm clock goes on a radio, and 7:10 every morning we sit in the room and the radio station has 10 trivia questions. And I love doing that. I actually have fun doing that. And so I'm trying to think about this like benefit of the memorization of facts, where like I enjoy it, but there's less and less practical value. And I don't know how how to make those like sync up in my mind.
I think there's a disconnect that we have to kind of overcome individually and probably as a society between knowledge and talent and all the things that we value versus the ability to monetize something. So the way I kind of think about it is, we may have mentioned this, you look at the best chess players in the world, and it's really hard to get to that level. You got to be super competitive, and you got to outsmart everybody, spend lots of time, build up the theory, practice nonstop. And the top 10 chess players in terms of their net worth, your average Silicon Valley developer is out there. But that took a lot of patience, a lot of dedication, a lot of, right? And I even look at Jeopardy, right? Every single person on Jeopardy knows a lot more than I know about anything. But it's, what do your chance of monetizing that knowledge may come down to like 100,000 over your life.
Yeah.
And you look at people who are really good at math, they're superhuman calculators, but can you monetize it?
Yeah. I think I agree, because I think it even comes down to like what we do for clients, telling them how to do a backdoor Roth. Like the knowledge that we have isn't the value we provide. It's usually some form of save them time and energy, some form of confidence that we remove the fear, anxiety that they're doing the wrong thing. Like we've done the research, we understand the processes, but there's also value in like, here you're doing these 5 things. If we do this 6th step over here, we can consolidate 3 of those. And it's not like they can look up the answer to each of those 5 things. It's the solution that's not that like they don't know the questions to ask ChatGPT. That's probably the best way to phrase it.
Mm-hmm.
Our value is helping them figure out, one, asking them a question about their lives that they haven't thought about yet, or here's the questions we are going to ask ChatGPT together because we need to figure out the solution to this one problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that there's a way to extrapolate that a little bit for the rest of society, that it's going to be those kind of connections, asking the right questions. It's the understanding someone's situation. This is related, and actually kind of one of the things you mentioned, like when it goes back to like those students cheating, like they could have always hired a random grad student at a different college to write their essay for them if they wanted to cheat. And the business version of that is, I know on the scale of a decade ago, CPAs could outsource the actual tax preparation, the actual like filling out the documents, to other firms outside the US. So they need to actually like just fill in the 1040. They'll outsource that. So in college it's cheating, in business it's outsourcing. But the CPAs who did that were more successful because they had more time with their clients to understand the situations. And it wasn't just give me all the data and I'll input it. It was having those conversations about what's going on and looking out for the things that the clients didn't know. I think several clients have expressed that when they come to me. It's like, I don't know what I don't know. And our job as advisors isn't to know all the answers. It's to know what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll figure out the solutions. I think that idea will still have value for a long time.
Yeah, I think that's the shift. Like, for example, in the in the computer science industry, that's where I started my engineering career. A large part of the success turned out to be how well can you Google, right? This is what drove careers for the last 2 decades. How well can you figure something out and then put it to work? Mm-hmm. So I think that's the emphasis that will likely happen with the chatbots, right? How well can you use them to accomplish what you need to do? And what I think also that means, though, is this could be quite disruptive when you apply this across all these different areas. That's part of what I want to get into. That's the few talking points for this conversation that I think are certainly worth mentioning, because if you get to the point where you can ask this tool relevant things that can increase your efficiency 10x, 15x, mm-hmm. that actually could be quite disruptive. Like, for example, I could have outsourced my blogs to, I was researching that a couple of years ago, and I could have hired a copywriter to do it, maybe, I don't know, $100 an hour or something like that, or per blog post or something like that. Literally that could be done for free now, or, mm-hmm. for far less, meaning that same person who I'd hired, they could be using ChatGPT to write posts for many more clients, or the business owner, can just do that myself. And I think there are many other areas where this type of tool could be leveraged that'll effectively change the way how things have operated in the past.
I agree that things will change, but it's going to be something like the people who are taking the test seriously and learning how to solve the MBA problems, those are going to be the ones who are succeeding anyways. They'll succeed in either environment. Either they have the knowledge or they know how to learn. And the ones who are always just getting the answers to the test, I guess maybe like they could have been like, I don't say cheating their way up, but like there's enough people that are on hand. Like I tend to be optimistic and naive. Like I think they would not have advanced as far as they could have, and they'll also still not advance as far because they like almost inherently they just don't get it. Yeah, that's like the best way to phrase like I can think of it. It's like they don't understand why they have to take the test.
I think you're right. But I think, for example, historically, you could have a good career at a job, let's say an engineering job, and you work at an auto plant where you're doing something that you learn on the fly, right? That doesn't require too much pre-knowledge, but you're able to keep that knowledge for decades or, a couple of decades over the course of your career. You don't really need to pull in that much new knowledge to get what you need done. You may refine your existing knowledge over time, but, for example, that whole notion of working on an assembly line, things like that. But now things have changed so quickly that you're obsoletized out of those roles, right? Robots can do that just as well. But I think the difference now is those types of jobs are targeting, what we might call the typical white collar jobs now, meaning this level of automation is encroaching on jobs that might be more considered, office type of environment jobs. I'll give one example. I have this other article pulled up here, and I'm just having fun with what I can click.
Okay.
Our different options. We're just reading titles, but I'll read it out for our listeners. This article says, first AI-powered robot lawyer will represent a defendant in court next month. So what the ChatGPT is going to do this time is it's going to listen in on the court conversation, right? Okay. And it's going to process in real time the response and put it into the earpiece of the defendant, who will regurgitate it back out. And okay, so what does this mean for the legal industry now? If you can have somebody represent you for almost nothing. And I don't think this is a done deal today, but I think of this as, what was Google like 20, 30 years ago? Well, okay, think about what this is going to be a generation from now. The writing's on the wall.
So for this particular example, from talking to the few lawyers I know, again, a generation ago, the first few years of being a lawyer at a law firm was just reading case studies. Like you're looking for precedent, and just like there's thousands of books, thousands of cases, and you put enough person hours at work to get this done, and you find something to help in your case. And that's kind of already gone away between digitization of old case textbooks. I don't know the phrase for that, but of all old cases, and combination of just searching power, well, searching text and Google search of newer cases. The benefit of those like person hours has gone away, and so it's harder to kind of bill out, oh, we had, your case was difficult enough that we had 10 people working on it. Where now, like, the cost is like, well, no, we have like 2. We have a lawyer who's passed the bar exam and an assistant.
Right.
So I can, it's similar to like the CPA example. I like, yes, we're already moving past that need to just like look things up, but there's still value in having that person there. And it actually reminds me of the self-driving car issue of if a self-driving car hits a pedestrian and kills the pedestrian, who's at fault? And this is a little bit like that of like, if the defendant loses the case, can the defend because of a ChatGPT mistake? Because if we have enough defendants using ChatGPT, like eventually one of them is going to make a mistake because they didn't understand process or precedence, something like that. Yep. Can you sue? Like, is ChatGPT liable in a way that lawyers have to be at this stage?
I think tactically those issues will come up, but I think the markets will figure out a way around that. For example, there's ways to indemnify anything these days, right? There's some sort of insurance you can buy, or it can be built into the cost of whatever product. With the AI cars, my feeling on that is if AI cars are 10 times less likely to get into an accident than a regular car, it does make sense because everybody's premiums would go down. Now, what happens in the case that it does? Well, yeah, we need to set some sort of precedent or some sort of way to handle that. Insurance companies can figure out some sort of model, I'm sure, because it can be monetized and it'll be factored in. For example, if the insurance companies sell you AI car insurance for a tenth of the price as human car insurance, I think a lot of people might jump on that. And the same thing, the same thing for the AI lawyers. Would you spend $10,000 out of pocket for a lawyer, or would you get the AI lawyer for free and buy some extra insurance in case he's wrong? My point is that there could be a market solution to handle these edge cases. I don't think it'll stop the innovation from happening.
I was imagining like the auto insurance company is saying, okay, you can pay $10,000 a year if you're going to drive yourself.
Yeah.
And you can only pay $500 a year if you take the steering wheel out of the car. Like, you're not allowed to drive.
Yeah. At some point, it's going to be, again, now it's near parity, but at some point, it's no contest. And at that point, there's no turning back for many of these things. The thing I just flashed on the screen, I'll put it up again. This is something I've actually used for a year or two. In fact, it's been around for a while. It's an AI-driven health assessment where it's called Ada. You can download the app on your phone. Again, no legal or medical advice at all on any of this, even financial or tax, by the way, but that's in our end outro. But anyway, the notion with this is it's like a first line of defense for me that I've used for like health issues, where it walks you through an assessment based upon what's going on, and it tries to zero in. And at the end, it gives you some notion of, do you need to run to the ER or do you need to sleep on it? Something like that. And for me, I found it helpful for many things because at least it gives you a starting point for conversations that may need to go to the next level. And in my mind, this seems like a triage benefit where in the past, what I might need to do is go to my healthcare provider, set up a meeting, take off work the next day, go to the doctor's office, and he says, hey, wait, what? Okay, you just need a Tylenol, something like that.
Yeah.
But my point is that's an efficiency saving, but by having something like this.
You need Tylenol and rest and like go home.
Right. It's viral. There's nothing you can do. Wait it out. Right. Yeah. So my point is these efficiencies help benefit everybody. And the large growth in productivity over time, the expansion of GDP is based upon a 2 to 3% increase in our efficiency each year.
Yeah.
And the benefit I see from things like this is far more than that, far more disruptive than that. So if you can,
it makes me like the future of medicine is not diagnosing the heart disease and prescribing the medicine or being the surgeon who can repair the artery. Like the future is, here's the behavior change you needed to implement 10 years ago to make sure you never got heart disease in the first place. Right?
Hopefully.
Like,
Yeah.
if we could get to that level, like that would just be flat out amazing. I know like things like Kaiser are trying to do that by having all the services in one place to make it easy as possible for you. I had a client, she told me like how towards the end of last year she had some health issues, but she had reached her out-of-pocket max. So when the doctor said, "Hey, you want to get this test?" Sure, let's go do it now. And so she just did all the tests, all the exams, all the things in December. And I know like they advertise and trying to do that on a proactive basis, but that's the kind of thing I think about. It's like that person-to-person behavior change, trying to make it easy, reducing friction, increasing the good things, decreasing the bad things, like enough of those little things, that actually might be a bigger benefit to your long-term health than trying to reduce the cost of an aorta bypass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see it. Reducing a lot of overhead that's spent now on, just again, triage of issues or just low level things that don't necessarily need a level 4, type of advice by a specialist or a GP. Like in the lawyer case, traffic tickets could probably be handled by, the AI robot. Yeah. If you're in for, I'm trying to think of murder one or something. I don't know.
You start to get like which trials require a jury trial, and I'm going to rewrite the Constitution to exclude the jury. That's bigger problems, but at least you can envision that it could be solvable.
Yeah, so it does seem like this type of tool can take a cut at these things. So I think a few things. One, I think the adoption is going to be pretty broad, and it seems like this will be like the Google, 20 years from now, this type of technology. So the disruption that we see will, I think, be along those same lines. And what does it mean? Well, I think for individuals who are looking to stay on top of this, I think it would behoove individuals to focus on that side of how do you use this as effectively as possible, within one's lifestyle or career. I think certainly not.
So how long until the first result on every Google search is an OpenAI ChatGPT answer?
Well, yeah. I, to be honest, I think it's a Scott. Anyway, I think it's a small jump from that to the point where you don't even. Yeah, sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied. I think it's a small hop, skip, and a jump from that to the point where you don't even think about Google. You just go straight to this.
I think there's other, like, would not surprise me if Google bought OpenAI, like something like that. Like there's other like business ramifications of like what's the actual platform you go to first, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I think they are getting investments. It might have been Microsoft I heard about, but who knows? But at this point, this will probably, it's already in many other technologies. So I'm not going to say run out of time, but before we use up too much time, I'll just spout out a few different sources that I've heard on this. For example, I came across one source that was, let's see, it was creating art, using AI. And I think I mentioned this last time, the notion that you can feed in questions or enough images and enough artwork to say, give me Van Gogh, that in the style of Mozart or something, right? Something silly like that. And it will do it. I've even heard artists who are getting called out for their art because it looked too much like AI, because a lot of art aggregators are needing to siphon for this because it's basically flooding the online digital world with art, because you can get an infinite amount of art instantly, an artist might spend hundreds of hours trying to put together. Same thing with music. You know what? Again, music, if you're able to compose never before heard songs that are hits, again, maybe not today, but think a generation out, this will be click your hands and you got any song you want that never existed before.
Yeah.
So writing books and all that. A few other things, Aaron, there's a podcast.ai website that actually takes voices like yours and mine and creates conversations on topics that we haven't discussed before. And it'll do that as well. I'll quickly show that.
Okay.
Here it is. It's called podcast.ai, but it just has 2 episodes right now. I listened to the first one from this Lex Friedman. Have you heard of him?
No.
He's actually a AI researcher, but he does have a pretty popular podcast as well.
Okay.
But then he's talking to Richard Feynman, who have you heard of him? Physicist, exactly. He's deceased.
Yeah.
So, but you listen to the episode, A, it sounds like it's him, and B, he's responding to questions that Lex is putting forward as if Lex had put them forward and Feynman is answering them. So at this point, you're having episodes that have never existed before out there. And again, this could only, Gen 2 of this is us just telling the AI to create an episode and put it out there for us.
See, but I think that's actually my point. You and I will still have these conversations for our own enjoyment and for our own fulfillment, regardless of if people would rather listen to us or the AI versions of us.
Well, okay, so it goes back to that monetization notion. For example, a lot of the things that I mentioned for other people, it's important to their monetization.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Right. For us, this isn't really part of our monetization, but podcasts are, art is, music is, and so on.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. So as long as you're, it's if you're doing it altruistically and doing it for the benefit of for just doing the thing, then you don't need to worry about AI. But if you are creating content as your job, as your career, to support your lifestyle, then yes, you do need to worry about AI.
Yeah, it's and again, I see it as disruption. I also want to make another comment of what I see it as. Productivity gains over the last generation have been incredible, frankly. But what we've also noted on other episodes is a lot of the productivity gains have gone to those that own assets, specifically stocks. So I think this is going to be disruptive, but I think most of the wealth, if things don't change in our structure of compensation, is going to go to the wealthy or those that own stocks, because their companies are going to use this technology to make things much more efficient. They're going to be able to cut jobs and run things more efficiently to the point where they will generate more income for the investors. Yeah. So I think that's maybe another conversation because we're already at the end, but I do see that as A, an opportunity, but B, a challenge that society will have to deal with.
Goes back to our universal basic income idea. So
yeah, maybe again, we're already over an hour, so I won't open too many more cans of worms here.
Okay, this is good. I think we kind of agree on enough of things, but again, I think that the people who were succeeding the right way will figure out how to succeed in the future as well. Like the people who actually go to college to learn how to learn will continue to learn how to learn, kind of thing. They'll continue to thrive.
Yeah, I am forever an optimist. So I see this as an opportunity across the board for increasing productivity, but also changing the way that we think about learning and understanding in general, and hopefully bringing us collectively to a higher level.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you for the conversation this month. I look forward to next month.
All right, Aaron. Thanks. I enjoyed it as well. And for those listening and watching, do subscribe, like, share, comment. We certainly appreciate the feedback and whatever you have to say. So thanks, everybody. And we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.